Right, welcome to everyone to our new series for the new year. Of course, we just finished reading the Torah yesterday, and we started it anew. So we are at Bereishit bara once more in the beginning. And for those who may or may not be aware, I have had a personal practice for many years of choosing a parish year by year to learn. Occasionally, I do repeat some of the classic commentaries that I feel I have forgotten. Actually, I've probably forgotten, a lot of them, but in any case, occasionally I do repeat them. But I also tend to look for something new that I can share with all of you. And my friend for the year is called Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg. You may or may not have heard of him. His commentary is called ha-Ketav ve-ha-Kabbalah, which means the text and the tradition, or probably more fully, the written law, the Torah shebeksav, the written Torah. The ha-Kabbalah refers to the received Torah, that is to say, the Torah which is received by way of tradition, by transmission, or the oral Torah, the Torah Shebal Peh. That's what he means when he says ha-Ksav ha-Kabbalah. I'll just tell you briefly about him. He lived in Königsberg. He was the rabbi in Königsberg for about 37 years. He was born in 1785 in the town of Lissa, and he died in 1865. So he lived for 80 years. Mecklenburg presumably was the town from which his ancestors derived. As I said, he wasn't himself born in that town of Mecklenburg, but rather elsewhere in Prussia. And he lived in Königsberg, which was an important city, a German-speaking city, albeit under probably some Russian influence. But there was a lot of German cultural and intellectual ferment in that city as well. And that is very relevant to his commentary, because the winds of reform, of religious reform and Haskalah enlightenment were sweeping across Germany. And he was among the very prominent, and I would say very not just prominent defenders of orthodoxy, but among those who were able to respond in kind to the critiques of the reform movement. And his commentary, as we shall see, draws on a wide range of sources, classical sources, many more recent sources, recent to him at any rate, but he does so with an intellectual bent, with an analytical style in which he seeks to clarify the meaning of the text, the meaning of the words. There's philology, etymology, to understand the meaning of the words and the derivation of the words. And he shows, and that's really the whole point, he shows the unity and the interrelatedness of the written Torah and the oral Torah, and that the rabbinic commentary is not based on fanciful or like imaginative explanations that the rabbis dreamt up, but rather there is a basis in the text, and it's not just a whimsical or casual basis, but it has firm foundations in logic and firm foundations in the actual development of the Hebrew language. I don't want to tell you too much about the commentary. We're going to learn it, and then we'll see for ourselves. Just a couple of brief additional biographical comments. He was a disciple of Rabbi Akiva Eger, the great Rabbi Akiva Eger. His main mentor in his hometown was the son of Reb David Tevel. Reb David Tevel was the author of Nachlas David, who in turn was a leading disciple of Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, who in turn was the most prominent and most well-known disciple of the Vilna Gaon himself. We will see even tonight that Rabbi Mecklenburg quotes the Gra very often. He regards the Vilna Gaon's teachings and writings as fundamental, and in a way, I mean, he doesn't say this, but I would say that he is extending the approach of the Vilna Gaon. In other words, the foundation of his own commentary, I would say, rests in significant part on the brilliant and compelling explanations of the Vilna Gaon himself. He influenced two other great rabbis of the 19th century who, like him, engaged in the battle of intellect with the advocates of reform, and like him, they developed an analysis of the Hebrew language, and they elevated it to a very sophisticated level, and that is the Malbim and Rav Simcha Hirsch. They were both influenced by Rabbi Mecklenburg in the commentary that we're going to now study together without further ado. So let's start. Hope you have a Chumash with you, with chapter 1, verses 11 and 12. I'll just open up my own Chumash as well. So here in the creation narrative, Vayomer Elokim Tad Shei Haaretz Desha Esav Mazria Zera. Hashem said, let the land produce grass or herbs. Esav Mazria Zera, grass that produces grass, and without going into the botany of it, I'm not that expert in it, but obviously grass propagates, and that capacity was embedded within grass when Hashem created the world. That's Desha Esav Mazria Zera. Eitz pri eitz pri liminehu, a fruit-bearing tree that produces other fruit like it. Asher zar'o bo al haaretz v'yichen, and it was so. Look at the next posuk. V'totzei haaretz desha esav mazria zer liminehu. So the earth did so. It produced a grass that would in turn propagate according to its kind. Liminehu ve'etz oseh pri asher zar'o bo liminehu. So what I'd like to share with you is the fascinating observation he says about the word liminehu. What is the meaning of that expression, liminehu, after its kind? Because again, in verse 11, got to pay close attention to the Hebrew. In verse 11, Vayomer Elokim tadshei haaretz desha esav mazria zera eitz pri oseh pri limino, after its kind in the masculine. In the masculine, limino, in the masculine singular. But in the following verse, it says liminehu. So it's not so common that we find that suffix, hey and vav. So he wants to clarify, to somehow like establish clearly what is the significance of liminehu. Why doesn't it say limino after its kind? What's liminehu after its kind in the plural? It could say liminehem, and that again would be the more usual form. So he quotes Ibn Ezra, who says it's really the same. The hey vav ending liminehu is the same as yud vav liminav. Actually, Ibn Ezra himself critiques that approach. He quotes it from an earlier authority and he critiques it, but ha-Kabbalah essentially vindicates that expression. He says at the simple level, it's just the same as liminav. It's the plural form that takes the place of the yud vav liminav, liminehu in the plural form. And he says Targum Onkelos renders it that way as well. If you've got Onkelos in the text that you have in front of you, like the Art Scroll Chumash will have the Onkelos there. And there you have Ispa Devar Zar'e Mezar'e Lizanohi. Liminehu, after its kind, Lizanohi, after its kind is in the Aramaic rendition, Liminohi. Says Rav Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg, though, and this I found fascinating, quotes the Vilna Gaon, and the Vilna Gaon says there's something deeper here as well. Liminehu, he recalls the verse in Shir Hashirim, in the Song of Songs, and there we have the, sorry, just let me find it in my text. There we have the words, Yashkeni minishikos pihu. May he kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. Yashkeni minishikos pihu. Say the rabbis, kinishikas chasan vekala, as a groom kisses his bride. Says the Vilna Gaon, what prompted the rabbis to use that imagery? I mean, the turn of phrase itself is pretty evocative in its own right. Why do the rabbis have to spell it out to say the way a groom kisses his bride? Says the Vilna Gaon, because it says Yashkenim and Shikos Pihu, Pihu the Hey Vav. He says that the Hey, if it said Piha, it would mean her mouth. If it said Piv, it would mean his mouth. The Torah uses in Shir HaShirim, we have the Hey and the Vav to indicate it's a kiss of both of them together. Yesterday, actually, it was on Tuesday when we left the sukkah for the last time. So I mentioned at Kesher that the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Shla. He says, I have seen great people in their love of the mitzvah of sukkah, or even the mitzvah of matzah, they kiss the matzah. He says they kiss the sukkah, and he says this is because of the love of the mitzvah. And he says, happy, joyous, fortunate are those who serve God with joy. So we kiss the walls of the sukkah. So, I can kiss the sukkah. My daughter can kiss the sukkah. It's the kisses of a male, kisses of a female. Piha, piv. But the Torah says pihu. The Shir HaShirim says with the hey and the vav to indicate it's like a male and a female. Chasen v'kala. It's a kiss that has the connotation of the intimacy, but also the connectedness, the interrelationship between the two. And that's Yashkenim and Shikos Pihu. Says the Vilna Gaon, that is the meaning here as well. That's why it says Liminehu, in order to hint to the male and the female, because the whole point here is the propagation of the plants, of the flowers, of the herbs, of the trees. That is accomplished through the male and the female. Now, it so happens that Rav Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg was quite knowledgeable about natural sciences. He may have been aware that trees reproduce through pollination, and they need the male and the female. I don't know if you're aware. Some trees, some types of trees are either male or female. And if you have a male tree, it's never going to produce any more fruit if it's only on its own. It needs a female tree as well. It needs the pollination, the pollination of whether bees or sometimes other insects as well. And that is the way that trees reproduce. There is that male and female interaction. But of course, at the deeper level, the Torah here is indicating how nature is interrelated. Nature functions in a way which is extraordinary, which is dazzling in its complexity and in its beauty. Says Rav Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg, ve-ha-Kabbalah. I'm sorry, it is a mouthful, but Gambiel, that's his name. He says, quoting the Vilna Gaon, that may be the meaning. That's why the Torah says, Liminehu, in order to hint to the male and female. And by the way, the Hey and Vav are two letters of the Tetragrammaton. The name of Hashem is Yud and Hey, Vav and Hey. The Vav and the Hey allude to the capacity for creation. That is the creative capacity that Hashem has endowed nature with, that means of propagating the species and nature itself. Hashem did not simply create the world to remain static, but Hashem created the world with the capacity to replicate itself. Liminehu. To me, this is a fascinating, eye-opening insight into that expression, liminehu, rather than just limino or liminav. And I think that, to me, it sheds new light on the meaning at the subtle level of that expression, liminehu. I want to turn now to verse 28. So it's also chapter 1, Pasuk Chav Ches. And here, Adam and Eve have been created. Vayivarech osam Elokim, vayomer lahem Elokim, pru uravu. God said, be fruitful and multiply. Umil'u es haaretz, and fill the world, v'chivshuha, and subdue it. Uridu b'digas hayam, and rule over the fish of the sea, v'of hashamayim, the birds of the heaven, v'chol chaya romeses ala aretz, and every creature that swarms upon the earth. Very important pasuk, really. This gives man the license and the mission to subdue the world, to exploit nature. Of course, there's a kind of balance there. Man is put into the Garden of Eden, la'avda u'leshamra, to work it and to guard it as well. So there's that duty of custodianship as well. But I don't want to go down the environmental route for the purpose of this conversation. However, what I want to share with you, again, I love the originality of it. Rav Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg says the following. He quotes Ramban. Ramban says that Hashem gave mankind the power, the capacity, the authority to dominate the world in accordance with their will. The vehemos, the animals, the shrotzim, and other creatures, whatever swarms upon the earth, man is the top of the hierarchy, the top of the food chain, whatever you might want to think about it. V'limnos v'lakor, to build, to uproot, to plant, and from the mountains to quarry stones or iron, and that sort of thing. That's what Ramban says, and that's how it's usually understood. Hashem gave man the capacity to harness the power of nature, to develop the power of nature for his own purposes. And indeed, there is no other creature that has the means, the capacity, the intellect to subdue nature in the way that man has. I made a bracha earlier, I'm not going to say a bracha now. Just in case anyone was. Says the ve-ha-Kabbalah that the word mil'u, it's odd that the Torah says, take again a close look. Umilu es haaretz v'chibshuah, fill the world and subdue it. He says, filling the world and subduing it, those are two separate things. Filling the world just means to propagate, that is to say, the human race will increase generation after generation. He will spread out, and eventually he'll fill the world. I mean, maybe an overpopulation issue, but initially in the early generations, the world is vast. It's wild, it's uncultivated, it's undeveloped, and man is given that blessing and that opportunity. Says ve-ha-Kabbalah, though, it doesn't really fit that well with the word v'kivshuha, and subdue it. Filling it and subduing it are two different things. Besides which, Ramban says it refers to planting and to uprooting, to quarrying, to mining, to mine iron ore or silver or gold or coal or petroleum. Those are maybe out of fashion, but for a long time they were extremely useful, still are useful, maybe a bit damaging, but they're still very useful. It says the word v'kivshua, subdue it. It's like to rule over something. It doesn't really fit well with those kinds of activities which deal with the inert earth. It's more applicable to the Baalei Chayim, to the animals, to rule over the animals. So he suggests the meaning is something different. Mil'uha starts to fill the world. It doesn't mean to fill. It means to fulfill. It means to fill an absence, to fill a void. And he gives a few examples of it. Psukim that should be familiar to us. He says, "Es mispar yamecha amale," I will complete the number of your days. In other words, if a person, life expectancy is 80, let's say, so Hashem says, I will enable you to live to the age of 80. Maybe even more than 80. Your life will not be cut short, as can sometimes happen. Means I will complete, I will allow you to complete your days. Or a chisaron, or an absence of speech. If a person says half a sentence and someone else finishes the sentence, or if a person tries to express an idea, can't clarify his meaning, he's trying to think of an example to illustrate what he's trying to say, can't think of one. There's someone else who understands the subject, and he adds, he like supplements, he completes the idea that the first person began to say. Umilesi es dvarayich. This was said by the prophet Nathan, who was trying to help Bathsheba, the wife of King David. He was trying to help her persuade the king that her son Shlomo HaMelech should reign. It's in the Haftarah. It's the very beginning of the book of Kings, and it's in the Haftarah for Parasha. I've got it here. Chayei Sarah. You can look it up. So Nathan, the prophet, said to Bathsheba, you go speak to King David, speak to the king, and when you're finished, I'm going to come in right away. And I will complete your words. I will back you up. I will sort of validate, or I will extend your words. Or Yimaleh Hashem kol mishalosecha. God will fulfill all of your needs, all of your requests. God will fulfill them. So he says, Miluas haaretz doesn't just mean fill the word, it means to complete the world. He says, what does it mean to complete the world? The world, nature has provided fruit, vegetables, grain. That's wonderful. It enables animals to flourish. But people, there are a lot of fruits and vegetables and certainly grains that people cannot eat very well as they are in their natural form. Or even wheat, how much wheat grows naturally in the wild? Not all that much. He says, in order for man to harness the power of nature, he needs tools. I'll read you a few lines here. He says, initially, man looked around and the world was full. Hashem had created nature that was bursting with life. But he didn't have a scythe or a sickle with which to harvest, to cut down the grain. He did not have a threshing implement with which to thresh the wheat. He didn't have a mill with which to grind it. He didn't have an oven within which to bake the bread. He didn't have a house in which to live. He didn't have something to protect him from the rain and from the elements, from the heat of the sun. Okay, heat of the sun, he could probably find a tree, but he needs so much more. So the meaning says, ve-ha-Kabbalah, umiluas haaretz, Hashem blessed Adam and Eve with the ingenuity, the ability to harness the power of nature and to build tools. This is from the Stone Age to the Iron Age to the Bronze Age, the ability of man to progress from the hunter-gatherer. I mean, even the hunter needs tools with which to hunt. They had nothing at first. This blessing, umiluas haaretz, it means complete the world. Hashem said, I've created a world which has fantastic potential. I'm going to endow you with the talent, with the ingenuity, with the means to develop tools so that you will be able indeed to harness the power of the world. It's with regard to the fulfilling of the deficiencies. That's what it says, miluas haaretz. Fill the world, meaning fill the deficiencies in the world through the ingenuity of creating tools. But then he takes it further in a beautiful, and I would suggest important, Musar vein. So he says like this, Hishlimu la'atzmechem dvarim hachaserim lechem ba'olam. You will again have the gift, have the ingenuity and the means, the brain power and the maybe through trial and error to compensate for that which is missing. The problem is, what about that expression of chivshua, subdue it? He says, now that you have the tools, now that you have all the time-saving devices, you've got to subdue your yetzer hara. Because when man is the hunter-gatherer, he has to expend so much of his time and his effort and his energy, he and his wife and his children, just to bring in their daily bread. I mean, again, in the early generations, who had bread? The idea of baking bread, making bread, manufacturing bread, they had to figure that out. They had to create tools for it. Little by little, over the course of probably, I wouldn't say centuries, probably a lot more, as we know. We don't need to get into the paleontology of it needlessly, but it took time, and man eventually developed time-saving devices. And my friends, that process still continues to this day. Time-saving is technology, the principle of industrial progress, the industrial revolution, created opportunities for man's capacity to harness the power of nature in ways which earlier generations could only dream of. And that has been going on, as I say, for a long, long time, probably never more dramatically or rapidly than in our own times. Although, as I say, the Industrial Revolution, other types of revolutions made a big difference as well. But, excuse me, says ve-ha-Kabbalah, this idea of ve-ha, the reference is to subdue your own Yetzer Hara, because a man or a woman who has too much time on his hands, so that can allow time and, intellectual imagination and fantasies and the pursuit of fantasies and the pursuit of gratification, which if a person is laboring from morning to night just to survive, doesn't have the leisure for that. But if he has the technology that make his life so much more comfortable, so much more efficient, he saved so much time, what does he do with his extra time? That's ve-ha. Learn to harness the power of the mind and use it for good. Use it for your own betterment. Someone showed me a book recently. It was written in Hebrew called Eved Ki Yimloch, the slave who becomes a king. It's rendered in English, an English translation. I like the title. It's called When the Tool Begins to Rule. And it's actually a book, a little booklet about the perils of a mobile phone. It's a tool, and it's a valuable tool. It's a useful tool. It's probably an indispensable tool, but it can come to rule. And when our lives are almost dominated by technology, when a man becomes a slave to technology, then he's failing in the blessing of ve-ha, the blessing which is also a challenge, because like most blessings, the blessing of filling the world, and as we say, developing the technology, the ingenuity to complete that which is lacking in the world, then we have the need to subdue and to control my own Yetzer Hara. That's Ezehu Gibar HaKoveshes Yitzro, who is powerful, who is strong, one who subdues his own inclination. So again, I don't repeat myself every time. I thought this is a fascinating insight, just such a well-known verse, which I thought I understood quite well according to the classic Mefarshim, fill the world and subdue it. ve-ha-Kabbalah reveals another possible interpretation, which I enjoyed very much. We've got technically about 1 minute left. I'll try to not exploit your time excessively, but I want to share with you in chapter 3, verse 9, again, one of the very famous verses, in fact, one of the famous words in Bereishit. After the sin of eating from the tree of knowledge, Hashem calls to Adam, it's Pasuk Gimel, it's Perek Gimel, Pasuk Tes, chapter 3, verse 9, Hashem calls to him and he says to Adam, Ayeka, where are you? Ayeka. So I told you that a lot of his greatness, ve-ha-Kabbalah, is philology, the study of words, the meaning of words, the development of language. He asked, what is the difference between efo, which means where, and aye, which means where? Ayeka is where are you? Efo ata. Why not say efo ata? Where are you? Is there any difference between aye and efo? Well, if you ask me, I would have said, I'm sure there's a difference. I couldn't tell you what it is. The reason I'm sure there's a difference is that the Torah doesn't use two different words if they have no distinction, if there's no distinction between them. To put it differently, there are no perfect synonyms in Hebrew, certainly not in classical biblical Hebrew. Efo and aye. So he says like this. more common is the word eifo. If I want to know where something is or where a person is, I say eifo, who, where is he? Like it says eifo hem ro'im. When Shmuel was going to anoint David HaMelech, eifo hem ro'im, Shaul HaMelech, eifo hem ro'im, where are they? Where are they tending the flock? I think it was Shaul HaMelech. Or eifo Shmuel v'David later on, where are Shmuel and David? Eifo Shmuel v'David, where, meaning I want to know where to find them, which town or which address. Eifo lakatet hayom. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, Eifo lakatet hayom. Where did you go to gather? They were gathering grain. Where did you go to gather today? Aval shoel ayeh, but a person who says ayeh doesn't want to know where. He's surprised that you're not where I thought you would be. Ayeh doesn't ask for the location. It's an expression of surprise. You're not where you used to be, or you're not where you should be. You're not where I expected to find you. It says in Eov, Roav Yomro Ayo, those who see him will say, where are you? I'm surprised to see you here. Fancy meeting you here. Ayeh chasdecha harishonim. Where are your earlier kindnesses? I'm not sure who says to him, I admit that's a pasuk in Tehillim. Ayeh Sarah Ishtecha, that's a pasuk we all know. The angels in the guise of Bedouins who came to visit Avram Avinu, they said to him, Ayeh Sarah Ishtecha. Where is Sarah, your wife? Meaning, why isn't she with you? I thought we'd find her here. We see you sitting outside the tent. She's nowhere to be seen. It's an expression of surprise. Where is she? We've got something to say to her. Where is she? It's surprise. She's not in her expected place. Says I want to have a Rav Yonah in a moment as well, but says ha-Kabbalah, that's the meaning here. Ayeka, Hashem said to Adam in the Sanhedrin, in the Gemara, it says, Ayeka la'an natalibcha. Where is your heart inclining? Like, where are you going? But the way the Vilna Gaon puts it, which he quotes, is beautiful. Ayeka, contemplate, think about yourself. How did you fall from your lofty position? How did you fall from where you were? I created you with such greatness, with such purity. What has become of you? Ayeka doesn't mean where are you? And Adam responds, well, I'm here in the garden. I was afraid, so I hid. The meaning of Ayeka is consider how you've fallen. How did you fall from your perch, from your height? Where is your level? And here I just want to conclude by reminding you something which I mentioned for those who have been to Kesher. I mentioned Rav Yonason Eibshitz, beautiful comment. He was my friend from last year, but as I always say, you've got to keep in touch with your friends. He says, Ayeka, a beautiful remez. Ayeka is Aye where? Chaf Hey. Chaf Hey is 25. Says Rav Yonason Eibshitz, man's soul was created on the 25th of Elul. We're less than a month away from Rosh Hashanah. On Rosh Hashanah, we celebrate the creation of man. Man was created on the 6th day. That means the world was created on the 25th of Elul. Hashem said, let there be light. And that's when the soul of Adam was created. Ayeka, Hashem said to Adam HaRishon, yesterday, Ayeka, on the 25th of Elul, you were with me. Your soul was in the heights, in the loftiest heights. And now you're keeping the company of the serpent. Now you have fallen into the clutches of the Yetzer Hara, the Sitra Achra. That's Ayeka. Where are you? Not where are you spatially, but where are you compared to where you should be? What has become of you? Ayeka. But in this way, he explains that wherever you see the term Eifo, it means where are you geographically? Where can I find you? Aye or Ayo or Ayeka means what has become of you. Why are you here? Why aren't you in the exalted place where you should have been? Okay, so we've studied tonight together three comments of ha-Kabbalah about Liminehu. We said that the Hey and Vav alludes to what it says in Shir HaShirim. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, says the Vilna Gaon, like a chassan and a kala, because it's not just piha or piv, but it's pihu. It's the intimate connection, which brings with it the capacity for creativity, for propagation, for procreation. That's the Minehu. We learned about Miluas Hearts Shuha. Fill the world means supplement what the world is missing, which is the technology to harness the power of the world. And after you do that, Shua, subdue your Yetzer Hara, because the technology which frees us can equally enslave us. And then finally, just now we said, Epho and Aye have two different meanings, as we've explained. Hashem said to Adam, Ayeka, you've fallen from where you were, from your greatness. Ayeka, what has become of you? Those are my thoughts that I personally enjoyed studying them, and I hope that everybody will enjoy listening and come back again next week. If you have any questions, comments, then now's your chance. You can unmute, and we're happy to hear from you. I hope everyone had a wonderful Yom Tov as well. I got launched right into my subject without greeting you properly. I hope you had a wonderful Tishrei, exhilarating Simchas Torah. If you're here in London, you know we had great weather in Sukkot nearly till the end. Our luck ran out around Simchas Torah time, but Baruch Hashem, we're looking forward to good things in the year ahead.